Hi, my name is Kristen and this is Kristen Craves Books. So once again, I'm here doing a collab with the great Beccie from Bex Reads. She always does the best collab videos. She always has the greatest ideas. So anytime she asks me to collab, I'm gonna say yes. And I'm really excited about this video in particular because a group of us are giving recommendations for books set in our favorite settings. And we all have different settings. I don't even know what everybody else chose, so I'm really excited to find out. So I'm gonna leave a link to everybody's videos and channels down below. And I thought a lot about this because there are a lot of settings that I love. I love books set on the water. I love small towns. I love forests. There were a lot of ideas, and then I just had like an epiphany. Duh, your favorite setting is probably haunted houses. And I like haunted house stories of all kinds that range from super scary to super atmospheric to kind of lighthearted. You can do a lot with a haunted house setting. So I tried to do this in different categories. I'm gonna have a couple YA ones to recommend, some that I think are a good place to start if you just want to dip your toes into haunted houses, and then some that I think are heavier and creepier. And I'm gonna start with the ones I own, and then I'll tell you some that I don't own but really want on my shelf after putting this list together. So let's do this thing. First up is one I haven't even talked about yet on this channel because it's a 2023 release and I just read it, and that is The Golden Spoon by Jessa Maxwell. And I gave this a 3-star, but it's a high 3-star. I am comfortable recommending this one if you are into murder mysteries. Some people are saying this is cozy, and I see where that comes from, but I think it's probably a little bit heavier than your typical cozy mystery. It doesn't follow a lot of the tropes that you might expect in a cozy, but it's a lighter mystery. I would not call it a thriller or a suspense. You might predict the ending, but the journey is what's important on here. And it is set at the chateau, and it's a cooking show called Bake Week, which is a lot like Great British Bake Off. And there's something creepy going on in the chateau. We get kind of flashbacks to what went on here in the past about one of the judges whose home this is. It's her family home, and the secrets that she's keeping, all while this bake week is happening and contestants are being sabotaged. So you don't know who's sabotaging these contestants, and then it all ends in a murder. And each of the contestants has a perspective, so you learn their background, why they're here, how they navigate through this house, and the creepy things that they find because they go into different wings they're not supposed to be. Some of them have pasts that you might not expect and really different reasons for being here. So I thought that was brilliant. And if you're gonna read this one, please listen to the audiobook as well as reading along. But the audiobook is incredible. It's full cast. Each of the contestants has a different narrator. So it was so fun. This is going to be adapted into a TV series, and I think that'll be so well done and atmospheric. The house is really a star in here. You could picture it so wonderfully. They have the tents just like in Great British Bake Off. I just thought everything about this was fun, but it's nothing like special in terms of the mystery. You're gonna predict it and all that kind of stuff, but just go along for the ride and enjoy the setting. If you're more into romance, this might be a good one to go with. This is The Widow of Rose House by Diana Biller, who I think is typically a romance author, but this definitely has Gothic historical vibes. It actually says it's in 1875 Gilded Age New York, a Gothic mansion, a woman shadowed by a tragic past, the man who loves her. So this widow moves into this house that is obviously haunted, or so she thinks, and she connects with another man in the town who believes her and is helping her out, and he is such a cinnamon roll, and they have such a sweet romance as she moves through her grief and as they try and figure out why this ghost is here and kind of form a connection with the house as well. So it's not as creepy as some of the others that I'm going to recommend. So I think this is a perfect one to start with if you're wanting to read a haunted house story, because at the forefront I would say that this is a romance, but it's also about character development, about understanding why something would be haunting this house as well, and I thought it was really well done. And then of course Bryony and Roses by T. Kingfisher. If you think about Beauty and the Beast, the house is a big deal in that, and you would say the house is haunted. So that is a big part of this story, as this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. But I think that T. Kingfisher actually makes the house even more of a character in this. The house feels more alive in this. And Bryony is navigating through the home and discovering things, and different wings closed, and different things that may be alive in the house, if you know what I mean. So I don't know, the house actually kind of has thoughts and feelings, and it was a really unique take on Beauty and the Beast, and I thought the house was almost the star of the show. So I recommend this one, and it's short It's a good place to start for haunted house stories. I think it's a good place to start with T. Kingfisher. If you're like me and you don't typically like Beauty and the Beast retellings, there's this. I talked about this in my last couple videos where we're talking about books I shouldn't have loved, but I love this one. I talk about it all the time at this point, but I don't really recognize or acknowledge that it is a good haunted house story in its own way, so that's a good place to start as well. Now I have 2 YA books to recommend to you, and White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson is one of them. I've read everything Tiffany D. Jackson has ever written. This is probably my least favorite of hers because it is her first horror novel, but I still thought it was interesting and did some amazing things. I will always love Tiffany D. Jackson's writing, and we are following a main character who, her family moves into this home that is kind of given to them by like this community, and it's a way to encourage people to move to the community, but she is realizing that it's haunted. She thinks somebody's living in the basement or something's haunting it, and her stepsister is acting really strange and nobody seems to believe her, and that all comes to a head by the end. But I had a good time with it. I don't know that this is the one I would start with for Tiffany D. Jackson, but it is a good starting point for haunted house stories. So if you've read Tiffany D. Jackson and loved her in the past, I do think this is worth trying if you're wanting to try some haunted house stories. I thought this was a unique take. Like a classic haunted creepy house story would be Jane Eyre, but there are some problems with Jane Eyre. But if you want a retelling of that does some different things, I would highly recommend Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood. I don't think this book gets enough attention, and I'm just gonna read you, actually Jordan Afueco blurbed this, that's one of my favorite authors. So this is following Andromeda, and she is like an exorcist. So she will go to different homes and obviously get rid of the ghosts and stuff, and we're following her in one difficult case in this book, but it's so beautifully written, and I thought it did some really interesting things. It was a unique take on haunted houses. I don't think I've read a lot of stories about exorcists, so I thought this was cool. And then you bring in that Jane Eyre retelling element to it, and it is something special and unique. And I know that this author has a new book out that I really want to try, so yeah, underrated book for sure. Let's move on to the more heavier things. If you are already a fan of haunted houses or creepy houses or gothic horror and you want to try more, or if you're just ready for something darker, this is a book I've talked about a lot lately, and this is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth, and I didn't look for any excuse to talk about it because it's one of my favorite books. Again, I think this is underrated, but you have to be the right audience for it. And this is more of a haunted boarding school, so it's almost like Dark Academia. And we're following 2 timelines, one in the past where this creepy things are happening at this boarding school for girls, and you will never look at wasps the same way again. And then we're in the present following these 3 women as they are putting on a movie that is inspired by the events of the past, and things are happening on the set. I just thought that this was brilliant. It's huge, but I tend to think of a lot of haunted house stories as no plot, just vibes, but I don't think that's the case in here. I think we got a lot of plot that was really intricate, really well done, but the haunting element is so good. I just loved creepy boarding schools. I need more creepy boarding school books because this is top tier for me. This next one is definitely not a haunted house. I would call it creepy strange. This is a wildly popular book, but that is for a good reason. This is Pure Nessie by Susanna Clarke. This was my favorite book the year that I read it. I need to reread it. It's so well done. We're following Pure Nessie, our main character, and he is writing his experience in this house where it's just him, and it's a whole universe in here. There are tides and the seas and different creatures and different statues, and he's just categorizing everything and taking notes of everything that he sees and experiences. And there is one other person that comes and goes, he calls the other, and his relationship with that person. And I just thought that this was so beautifully told, so beautifully written, so strange and wild, like a whole universe inside a house. It's hard to wrap your mind around, but it's so well done, and you just have to give it a chance. It might take a minute to orient yourself in the story because of the nature of the diary entries and just the strangeness of it all, but trust me, it's worth it. And then the last one I own, this is an ARC, I need to get a finished copy, but this is The Ghost Woods by C.J. Cook. You know I love C.J. Cook, one of my favorite authors of all time. I think that nobody writes atmosphere like C.J. Cook. And in this one, The house in this is like a home for unwed mothers, and again, this is told in 2 timelines, but they're only like 5 years apart. And in the more current timeline is when a lot of the creepy stuff is happening, because our main character is kind of realizing what happened 5 years earlier, and the house is so strange. She's hearing like children laugh and stuff like that, but there are no actual children in the home, just for pregnant women and then the family that runs the home. And there are like certain areas blocked off and stuff like that. I just thought that this was brilliant, fantastic. CJ Cook, an all-time favorite. I've gushed about this so many times, so I will just leave you with that recommendation. Now I have an author recommendation, Simone St James. You were probably thinking of her already. I have only read 2 of her books, but love them, and I think they both fit in this category. And that is The Sundown Motel. So that is a creepy haunted motel, and that was just so well done. I've never read anything quite like that before. And then the other one is one I always comp, similar to Plain Bed Heroines, but I think it is an easier read, more accessible, probably lighter and more fun to read. You can get through it a lot quicker, and that is The Broken Girls. Again, it's like a haunted all-girls boarding school with a past and present element. Very different in where they go, but a similar tone to Plain Bed Heroines. So if you want something lighter, The Broken Girls is fantastic. I think that's my favorite of the 2, but they're both so well done. One that I read in February for the 72 Hours in the Haunted House readathon, and I gave it 3 stars, but actually, the more I think about it, the more I enjoy it, so I might bump that up to a 3.5. And that is Gallows Hill by Darcy Coates. And I also think, though I've only read Gallows Hill, I just know from everybody in the bookish community that I follow who reads Darcy Coates loves her stuff, and a lot of it is haunted house stories. And she's got a lot of books like The Haunting of Ashburn House. It's obvious, like it's just one of the tropes that she loves, and I love that she loves it. So Gallows Hill is set in a haunted house, but that is also a winery, and we are following a main character who has inherited this house, which seems to be a popular trope in haunted house stories. So these people never know what they're getting into, and that's part of the intrigue of it all. And the ending of this book was fantastic. It's a slow burn. It's a bit longer than I like my horror to be, but it's worth it for the ending. Trust me on that. And it does have that typical haunted house factor, spooky, atmospheric, all that stuff. And I think Darcy Coates is a good author in general to explore if you're looking for more haunted house stories. I know I already recommended a Tea Kingfisher in this video, but I actually just listened to an ALC of A House with Good Bones, which is her March release. It comes out at the end of this month, I believe. It's a haunted house story. It's one of her horror books, and if you love her horror, I think you'll enjoy this. And even if you've read her horror in the past and didn't like it, I still think this is worth picking up. And again, What Moves the Dead by her is also a haunted house story that I loved. It's a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher. It's fantastic. But this new release, A House with Good Bones, is kind of quirky and humorous, but atmospheric, and it goes there, and there's some body horror and stuff, and it's following our main character who comes home to spend time with her mother, and she realizes that her mother's acting odd. She's painted all the walls white, and she's acting a bit more proper and religious than she usually is, and she suspects that there's something strange going on here, and there is. But it's also quirky. I just love the way that Tea Kingfisher does her horror, so I recommend that one. I think a lot of her horror, the twisted ones that I read, I would consider that a haunted house story as well, so another good author to check out if you want to read more haunted house stories, Tea Kingfisher's horror specifically. And then speaking of What Moves the Dead, the last book I want to recommend is one that is similar to that, and that is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I think a lot of us have read and loved this one. No other book I have read really felt like the house was alive in quite the same way as it is in Mexican Gothic. That house gave me nightmares. You'll never look at mushrooms the same way, and it's like our main character is dreaming things, but they're really happening around her, and I just had strange dreams forever. And this is following a woman who gets a call that her cousin needs her help, and she goes to spend time with her cousin and her cousin's new husband, and strange things are happening in the house. Didn't love the ending. I don't think this needed like a romance, but the actual atmosphere of this is fantastic. And it's no surprise, Silvia Moreno Garcia's writing is top tier, next level. So of course this is just fantastic. And I'm sure I'm missing some. I have a ton of my TBR, so if you would like a separate video of haunted house books, creepy house books, strange house books on my TBR, I'd love to do that because it's a mile long list, and this is already almost at 20 minutes, so I'm gonna stop myself. leave any recommendations you have for haunted house, creepy house books down below. I would love to hear them. And I will leave links to everybody else's videos. I cannot wait to see the settings they choose. And if you were gonna do this video, I would love to know what setting you would choose. What's your favorite setting, and maybe a recommendation of a book that is set there. Thanks again for your support. I'll talk to you all soon. Bye for now.